The holding point. Sometimes a single yellow line with the dashed one next to it, sometimes a double. There could be flashing lights, stop bars, taxi signage, painted markings. Some airports, there's nothing at all. But what does a holding point actually mean? And why is failing to understand or respect them so dangerous? Plus, what does it really mean when we call ready at the holding point for departure? I'm going to discuss that and so much more coming right up. So strap in and let's get into it.
Good morning, 3614, Alpha Mallow 7 PAB with Alpha.
Coordinating, Halen, I'm running bank. Power, bank pressure rolling at 30 degrees. That's 30 degrees there. Stand by star 9000, 1013, K 525.
G'day everyone. Welcome to episode 161 of the Flight Training Australia podcast, the podcast all about flight training and flying in Australia and beyond. I'm your host, Trent Robinson. G'day. Thank you for joining me and wishing you another amazing week up in the sky, in the classroom, or just at home or in the office, dreaming of flying, whatever it is you might be doing out there. Before I get into today's episode, just a quick, public service announcement, if you like. Some of you emailing me will notice that I am taking a little while to get back to you. I do sincerely apologize for that. I've got a bit going on at the moment and I am getting a massive influx of training requests and everything else. A bit of a victim of my own success, I guess, but your calls, your messages, your emails are extremely important to me as always, and I normally get back to you very, very quickly, but just lately I'm struggling to get them done, and I want to make sure I give you the right information and dates that are available that are going to work for you rather than going back and forth. As such, a few messages sometimes get a little bit caught up and lost up in social media avenues. So if you have a genuine training inquiry, could I just ask that you do send it to me via email, info@trentrobinsonaviation.com.au. I'll try and just give you a quick, got your email, I'll respond soon. I'm going to set up a little autoresponder just so you know that I have received it. So that way you don't need to sort of text me and message me on every single platform as well, because then I get confused and I'll reply to you twice or three times even for some people. If your handle doesn't really match your name and everything else, I won't link it all up necessarily. So yeah, that's all. But otherwise, loving all the messages. Thank you for everyone for interacting on the socials, and really look forward to hearing from you very, very soon. And if you do want to send me a message, maybe you could leave a 5-star review on Spotify, or if you're on Apple Podcast, or even if you're not on Apple, duck on over, log in, and you can leave me a written review there as well. The more the merrier. It helps the podcast be found and seen, and helps keep it all relevant in the ratings, I guess, and showing up for others just like you. It'll be able to help them as well in their aviation journey, or just keep them entertained. So, the other week, but the 20th or so of February, nearly 2 weeks ago now, I asked a question on my Instagram story. What does the holding point prior to departure mean to you? And I obviously wrote this with a little bit of a baited question, but I didn't want to be too specific or give away anything particular. But it was just interesting to see what people would say. And obviously some people said that, yep, that's when you need to hold. And there was some really funny answers as well, of course, that there's going to be the tower's going to tell me to hold short because there's a E190 on a 47-mile final. I know what you mean. Hold, pre-takeoff checks, check the windsocks, set the radios, contact the tower when ready. Just memories of sitting and sweating in a 210 for the best part of an hour during an exercise at pitch black. Yep, we've all been there before. 1 hour, 15 minutes is my record. What else have we got here? It means I already need to pee. And obviously clearance to get onto the runway, that sort of thing. Oh, and there's one other good one here from somebody. An important signal to pilots to make sure your playlist is sorted prior to takeoff. All right, well, I won't condone listening to music whilst you're flying, especially in controlled airspace, because you might miss something. But some really good responses there. But what I wanted to sort of raise and obviously discuss today is the whole point of holding points. Obviously how they're marked, and everybody hopefully knows all that, but really understanding what needs to happen at that point, and when we make our ready call, what that really means as well, because I'm seeing some very interesting things lately. And this isn't just me. I know, as always, it's across the board and all over the place. And then I want to talk about moving back to the significance of the holding point and radio transmissions is some real world examples of what happens when the holding point discipline and situational awareness breaks down. And obviously I'm referring to the most recent incident, which is the Chicago Midway airport between Southwest Airlines 73 having to go around with the FlexJet business jet crossing the line, but also the Haneda Border Force accident or Coast Guard accident in 2024, and looking at ATSB a whole heap here in Australia as well. Just fortunately haven't ended up in disaster, but could very easily have done so. So as far as holding points go, some airports, like I said, don't even have them. All right, if you're at a more of a bit of a remote country strip, a private strip, or anything else, it might just be gable markers that could mark where it is. There might be some form of marking on the ground, but you definitely have to have your wits about you there. But as far as Class D, Class C airports, with your yellow solid lines and your dashed lines, obviously the solid line means stop, just like a road stop sign, and a broken line means give way or proceed. You can cross it with care. So the road rules translate directly to flying in that sense, which is really, really good. But obviously, it's sometimes up to you to decide whether it's safe to cross. Other times, you listen to air traffic control instructions, hopefully, and that will tell you, and you must not cross unless you're cleared to do so. So standard holding points are exactly that. 2 solid lines, 2 dashed lines painted across the taxiway. Hotspots are areas on airports where runway incursions, which means an aircraft crossing a holding point without a clearance, has done so or has entered that area not even knowing that that was a point where they needed to stop. And some airports do have complex holding points or exit points. You're exiting one way at speed, clear the runway, and no sooner have you cleared the runway that you're at a holding point that you may not have picked up yet and can easily cross, which will take you onto another runway. Now, if you're not used to parallel runways or places like Bankstown that have 3 runways, a left, center, and a right, even more hectic, then these are places that you need to be very careful of and just be very mindful of when you are working there. All right. But that is definitely something that you need to prepare for and understand where your signage is, where the holding points are, and be very, very clear on your taxi instructions, should they be given, to make sure that you do not cross an area that you have not yet got clearance to do. So if you're at an unfamiliar aerodrome, the easiest way to help you there is to A, preparation, but B, have a taxi diagram out in front of you. Now we've got the diagrams in URSA, they're a little bit smaller, not so good, but you can also via the Air Services Australia website go to the DAPs, which is the departure and arrival plates for airports, and go to the main airport that you're at, and you'll find a nice bigger A5 size airport diagram with all the taxiways. And for more complex airports, it even then potentially zooms into specific aprons and everything else, and can be really, really useful even for VFR pilots. So there's a little top tip. The other one, of course, is CASA for the main airports, also put out their little runway diagrams which show the movement areas, that shows the holding points, and it shows the incursion hotspots, right, wherever they are in the airport. So definitely worthwhile checking those out. I'll put a link to those in the episode description so you can find them easily. The other one, of course, is for Melbourne and Darwin, is land and hold short operations or LASO markings, which are essentially holding points written on the runway, or printed, they're not written, but printed on the runway, used at intersecting runways. So that also, backed up by lighting and things, is very, very important. The moral of the story is, if you don't fully understand the holding point markings, the signage at an airport, or clearances that you have received, make sure you question it, ask for clarification on ground or tower. All right, so when we get to the holding point, I see people in such a rush to call ready, and the flaps aren't set, the radio's lighting, things aren't set or ready to go. They haven't really thought about the takeoff safety brief, their departure brief, and all this stuff gets skipped or just bypassed completely. And off we go, open up the throttle and sail off into the sunset. Now, every school teaches things differently. There are various mnemonics out there, lights, camera, action, all that sort of stuff. Up to some school students that I've seen recently are having some 11 to 12 items they are doing, lining up on a runway. Now, I'm not one to get involved in telling schools how to do things, but for God's sake, can you do something about that? It's just the most absurd thing to be so head down doing that many checks trying to line up on a runway. All right, I've had people turning the wrong way, turning inside the runway center line, and just completely distracted. So we don't want to do that, all right? But anyway, whatever the checks you are, these are things we need to think about. So when we get to a holding point, as much as possible should have been done at startup and in the run-up bay, or the passing bay, as they call it here in Darwin, before going to the holding point. Once we're taxiing towards the holding point, we sort of have to keep a certain pace. We're going to have potentially other aircraft following us. We've got other bigger aircraft, burning a lot of fuel. So if we're sitting at a holding point, not ready, we're going to hold everyone up. So we don't want to head to the holding point until we are in a position ready to go and we've done everything. So checklists, really, really important. Make sure all checks are complete. Make sure we know where the runway is, what holding point we're going to. We've got our clearances sorted out, transponder codes entered, lights and settings, flaps, trims, everything else all done, GPS programmed, avionics and nav aids set up, ready to go. So that when we report ready, we really are ready. We're simply saying that we are ready for departure and good to go. We want to be mentally prepared. All right. I just said before, takeoff safety brief, departure brief. A lot of people are not thinking about where they're going to go. They're just dealing with the immediate 1.5, 2 meter cubic meter space in the cockpit that they're in, and not much else. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? What altitude limitations? What about the weather that's on our track that you haven't even looked at and considered yet? All right. All that forms part of calling ready. Did you listen to the ATIS? Did you just get the runway code and the QNH, or did you actually listen to all of it? So in that case, you would have noted that there's a specific issue on the ATIS that is about to affect us that you haven't thought about yet. All right. That goes for inbound to airports too. It's really, really important if there's an airport with an ATIS that you listen to the whole thing, not just the code and what runway is in use and maybe the QNH. Listen to all of it. There's always information on there, including the wind, temperatures, usually just there to bitch about, right? But it might have an impact. But sometimes certain nav aids might be out, taxiways closed, or other bits and pieces that you need to be aware of. So make sure you listen to that properly, which is just going to build to the third point, which is overall situational awareness. All right. If we're going to line up on a runway, we might get told after the 310 and final, line up and wait, or line up behind and wait. And I've had some people say, well, what's a 310 look like? So there's something else as well. If you're operating an airport and you're not used to various aircraft, you might need to do some study. Get to know the aircraft. And that's sort of the thing I cover off in the GA transition course. All the different aircraft you might fly up here and the aircraft that are operating, so you know what to keep an eye out for. So when you do say ready, it really means that you are ready to take off at a moment's notice. Sometimes you might get an expedite, line up and go. If you're fluffing around doing other things, it's going to cause issues. So don't do that, because we don't want to inconvenience others, but more importantly, we do not want to create a safety risk. All right, which leads me to the final closing point, and that is that holding point awareness and radio call clearance awareness. Now, you would have all seen just recently the obviously the mid-air with the Black Hawk and the CRJ. All right, that was an airborne incident, but again, comes down to possibly not listening to clearances and not hearing it properly. But the Chicago Midway disaster just the other day, Southwest 737 was literally half a foot off doing what would look like an absolutely beautiful landing, by the way, and then executed a go-around. Now, this happened, I think, 4 days after I posted my Instagram post, not even knowing, of course, that was going to happen. And basically what happened, if you haven't seen it, is a FlexJet, I think it was a Challenger or something, was instructed to hold short of runway 31 center. There was some confusion on the radio calls from ground before that onto what the clearances were. And this obviously led to pilot disorientation. They were focused on the departure runway right up the other end, and they crossed the hold short line and entered an active taxiway, active runway. As the Southwest 737 was coming into land, they saw this aircraft was approaching and wasn't going to stop. It was excellent situational awareness from that crew, and they conducted a go-around and came back around and landed uneventfully. So it was absolutely fortuitous that they saw this aircraft and went around at the time they did. Funnily enough, I was in the 210 the other day at MKT. Coming down, we were not stable, we were fast, and I was just about to call go around when a four-wheel drive popped out behind bushes, kind of in a bit of excitement to head off and enter the runway to cross to the other side, and then suddenly hit the brakes after already crossed over into the gable markers. I was already in a go around, but then I saw that and made sure that we climbed as we needed to clear the vehicle. It was well ahead in front of us. But it just goes to show that this can happen anywhere, anytime. You need to be aware of your situational awareness, what is going on in the airport around you, what is your clearances, what is the taxi path that you're going to take to get there, and maybe just clarify and plan that taxi clearance just like you've never been there before. All right. When I was at Auckland in the DC-3, it was first light in the dark, taxiing along, and I read the clearance back. Then I looked at my plate. I verified the taxi clearance, identified where the holding point was or the taxi limit was. We did the same thing out of Sydney as well, and no issues whatsoever. So it just means we've got to slow down a little bit. We cannot afford for misinterpretation or miscommunication of ATC instructions. All right, mention the Haneda accident where the Border Force aircraft, sorry, I keep calling it Border Force, the Coast Guard aircraft just taxied straight out onto the runway and got absolutely cleaned up by another airliner, which was just absolutely tragic. Again, confusion on taxi call instructions, or taxi clearance instructions rather. And more importantly, why are we not clearing left, center, right? Clear left, clear right, clear the approach end of the runway. All right, when you're at a controlled airport, I have to say it's a lot easier because aircraft are only coming from one way. A non-controlled airport, the wing can be marginal. So at MKT, we've got no holding point. We've only got gable markers when we're down there. And aircraft could be landing from either end sometimes because the wind is often calm on the ground. or maybe a nod or two here or there. So people come in from all over the place. We may have missed a radio call. I had someone the other day who was not on the discrete CTAF frequency. They're on the generic 1267 frequency. They then crossed through center line as I was on final. And luckily, my traffic awareness in the aircraft went off, and I also happened to just spot them out my right eye at the same time. And they were incredibly apologetic, and nothing bad happened. But it just goes to show that you need to be conscious of what's going on at all times. All right, if we have a look at the ATSB website, look, July 2024, Dash 8 and a Cherokee. Another Dash 8 and RV6 in December 2023. Lancer Dash 8, a Cherokee and a Saab. Cherokee and a Dash 8. What is it with Dash 8s? All right, these are all over east mostly, but these are accidents waiting to happen. If you read these reports, it's all about people assuming that no one else is there, not making radio calls, not looking properly, all this stuff, all right? So really the moral of the story has got to be never assume a clearance. Always read back and verify it. Visual confirmation of your taxiways, your signage, where is the taxiway you may be cleared up until, identify that. And when we are cleared to cross, irrespective of whether it's by air traffic control or not, you must look. All right. ATC, they do a fantastic job, but just like us, they can make mistakes too. So if something feels wrong, just ask for clarification. It really doesn't take much. All right. So remember, holding points, they're not just a painted line on the taxiway. They have a meaning. All right. They're critical to keeping us separated and preventing incursions. When you report ready, it should mean you're truly prepared for departure, not still flicking switches and second guessing your plan. All right. Be safe out there. Keep an eye on everything. And of course, if there are any incidents or issues, make sure you report it, because we can't complain about things if the regulators don't know about it, and we can't identify problem areas. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for listening. Have a fantastic, safe week. Thank you to all my Patreon subscribers and members there. There's some more articles and DC3 stuff going to be coming up there probably maybe by the end of the week, otherwise next week. Some exclusive content there. And we will have a ferry trip wrap up coming up very, very soon. All right, until then, stay safe, look after yourselves, and remember the golden rule: aviate, navigate, communicate. Cheers, everyone.